Jaylen Brown finally gets the calls he's been looking for as he and Devin Booker battle it out in a 40-piece showdown on Monday night. Up everyone, and welcome in to Your Celtics Source here on a late Monday evening after the Boston Celtics take down the Phoenix Suns 120-112. This was an MVP performance from Jaylen Brown for sure. This was a battle between him and Devin Booker, who dropped 40 as well. On the other end, he was unstoppable. But the story of the game, in my opinion, has nothing to do with 85% of the game, to be honest. It was the Celtics, just playmaking and finishing down the stretch in crunch time. And the most important part of that is Jayson Tatum deferred to Jaylen Brown. And this has to happen for the Celtics to have success going forward for the rest of the season, but more importantly, in the playoffs. It's Jaylen Brown's team this year. Jaylen Brown needs to be the guy scoring 28 to 30 points a game. Jayson Tatum does the stuff that Jaylen Brown doesn't do, which is the playmaking, the facilitating, the rebounding, although Jaylen Brown's taken a big step forward in rebounding this season. But I really want to see Jayson Tatum going for triple-doubles in the playoffs. 25 points, but, 8 to 10 rebounds, 6 to 8 assists, making plays for others, facilitating. Whereas Jaylen Brown can just be the guy that gets wherever he wants, physical drives to the basket, which he certainly did in this game, and he finally got the calls that he was looking for. 20 free throw attempts, goes 19 of 20 from the line, or 19 of 21 actually from the line. This is an aberration, of course, in terms of the number of free throw attempts, but it's great to see that Jaylen Brown's finally getting the calls that he's been asking for all season, because he gets fouled on every play, and he's not the guy that, not to throw shade at SGA, but is going to just flop whenever he loses the ball, try and grab, or get a foul called. He's not the guy that pump fakes and then tries to go up and score, get the defender to jump. He just drives to the basket, and if he gets fouled, he gets fouled. And I love to see that he was making the most of his physicality in this game, not picking up offensive fouls, but getting defenders to slap on his arm, and he was still making the shots. So this was just a brilliant game for Jaylen Brown. A little bit more on Jaylen Brown later, but back to my sort of crunch time point, that Jayson Tatum's not in a rhythm right now, and he might continue to improve as he gets his legs back under it, as he continues to get more games under his feet, right? And his shooting might, his efficiency at least might get better. And, he wasn't bad in this game by any stretch. I think he went 8 of 18, 2 of 8 from 3, but 7 rebounds, obviously, and 4 assists. You'd like to see the assists a little bit higher, but obviously that depends on guys making shots around him. But the most important thing, right, is that if Jayson Tatum is going to be shooting at, a sub-efficiency than maybe his career average, or maybe, we saw last year and the year before, and that might just be the case given that he's not fully going to be back to himself until next year, most likely. It's going to be some par Jayson Tatum in the playoffs. Now, if it's 80 to 90%, I think that's fine. And I think he's inching closer to that. He's not quite there, but he's getting closer to that. But that being said, you don't want Jayson Tatum, forcing ISO possessions late into the game. Jaylen Brown, the Celtics haven't been a great crunch time team this season, but I think having Jayson Tatum on the court is going to make it easier because it frees up Jaylen Brown to go one-on-one like we saw in this game. Normally the Suns would probably throw two guys at Jaylen Brown on most possessions, but they couldn't do that with Derek White on the floor, with Jayson Tatum on the floor, with Peyton Pritchard having a good shooting game as well. And you have the additions of guys like Scheierman Obviously, we know what Sam Hauser can do, but Baylor Scheierman has taken a big step forward this year in terms of his playmaking, his ability to put the ball on the floor and play like a point guard, even though he's probably more like a forward, sort of like Sam Hauser is. So that's been a great addition. So that leaves Jaylen Brown one-on-one, which, Jayson Tatum can bring the ball up the floor, force, a defense into a rotation, and that gives Jaylen Brown a great opportunity to drive to the rim or get an open shot. And that's how I want the Celtics to be playing in crunch time. I don't want Jayson Tatum taking sidestep threes, step back threes. He had a great play with Jaylen Brown in transition where Jaylen Brown was able to steal the ball from Devin Booker, and the two of them, I think Peyton Pritchard was actually there as well, but they, can go coast to coast, and Jaylen Brown leaves it to Jayson Tatum, who had a great Euro step and finish. But I need the two of them to be playing, off one another, to have Jayson Tatum draw the defense and then kick it to Jaylen Brown, not the, the fall-away threes that we've seen in the past from Jayson Tatum, because he's not going to make enough of them this season. The efficiency is not going to be quite up to, and he's never been actually a superb efficiency guy, right? It's always been an up and down. He'll have games where he goes off from three, but then he'll have games where he's 2 of 8 from three, but he impacts the game in 100 other ways, with the rebounding, with the playmaking, with the physical drives to the basket. Jayson Tatum can do stuff even when he's not shooting well, whereas Jaylen Brown, is going to be more of that guy that depends on his efficiency, and that's only going to be helped by Jayson Tatum playing sort of off the ball in terms of, late shot clock scoring, late game scoring, right? And that doesn't mean Jayson Tatum can't have his moments in the game. In fact, Joe Mazzulla let him go for an entire first quarter. First time this season that Jayson Tatum has gone and played an entire fourth quarter. And Jayson Tatum's been sort of, I'm not going to say complaining, but, he's been frustrated with, how quickly they've been pulling him, and he hasn't had the chance to get his rhythm. And we definitely saw in this game, in that second quarter, third quarter, Jayson Tatum, when he played that full quarter, he looked just so much better because he was able to get into a rhythm, play with guys for a while and not have to worry about coming in and out of the lineup, playing with different guys, and it just made a big difference for the game. And then, obviously, they're great in crunch time. He finishes a team high plus 11, but him and Jaylen Brown were plus 7 in crunch time together. But obviously, Jayson Tatum, that's probably the overarching story of every game. But as for this game itself, Jaylen Brown, he's probably not going to win an MVP. In fact, it's probably out of the question now that anybody but SGA, Jokic, maybe Wemby will win MVP. But the Celtics, I think they're like 4.5, maybe 5 games behind the Pistons. They're probably not going to catch the Pistons for first place. But if they can catch the Pistons, that puts, just hard questions on where Jaylen Brown fits in the MVP conversation. I think you have to put him at 4th. If the Celtics are the 1 seed in the East, with everything guys were saying about this team, how Jaylen Brown couldn't carry the team. If the Celtics finish first in the Eastern Conference, you have to put him at 4th. If they finish second with the numbers that Jaylen Brown is doing right now, and I think Jaylen Brown has definitely taken a little bit of a step back scoring-wise with the addition of Jayson Tatum, and he talked about that in the post-game, that, it's been, I'm not going to say, he didn't say a struggle, but it's been hard and difficult to figure out how to work him into the game while Jaylen Brown is still trying to put up his numbers and continue to prove that this is his team. Not that there's any beef. I hate, we're not going to have the conversation of, is it Jaylen Brown's team? Is it Jayson Tatum's team? Who can, can these two teams, play together, or two players play together, win games together, win a championship? They've already done that, right? We know that's possible. That's not the problem. The problem is, how do you work in a subpar Jayson Tatum right now, get him his reps while not taking away from what the team has done this season? And so far, I think they've done a great job. Jayson Tatum hasn't had, he's had stretches where he's the only guy out there. And those haven't been as great as, obviously, Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum both on the floor. But he hasn't taken away from the offense. He's only added, and that's what you're hoping for, right? This is a team led by Jaylen Brown with, the additions, or I guess the improvements and the just fantastic performance of Queta at center, the development of guards like Baylor Scheierman, Ron Harper Jr., Ugo Gonzalez, all those guys. That's the story of this team. Jayson Tatum comes in on top of that and just adds and puts this team from maybe a second-round exit to possibly a championship caliber team. Not saying that any of these teams will beat the Thunder or the Spurs coming out of the Western Conference, or whoever comes out of that, because I do think the West is a step ahead, a step above the Eastern Conference. That being said, Jaylen Brown in this game, I did mention a little bit earlier, he had the 41 points, 2 of 5 from 3, 10 of 20 overall, with the 19 of 21 from the line. I thought he was great, rebounding the ball, making plays for others, had 7 rebounds, 6 assists as well, only 4 turnovers, and really anything below 5 turnovers from Jaylen Brown. Just the way he plays and how much he's been carrying this offense is great. You can't, throw anything, nitpick anything, below 5 turnovers from him. And then obviously his 3 was falling today, only 2 of 5, but, what is that, 40%. Had a great, fantastic sort of sidestep 3 in the corner. I forget who he shot that over, but, Jayson Tatum had kicked it out, and Jaylen Brown sidesteps for 3. That's something we haven't really seen from him in previous seasons, right? He's never been that, 3-point shooter. That really hasn't been his game. But this year, he has to be that 3-level scorer on high efficiency because of, without Jayson Tatum, with the talent that they lost in the offseason, it had to be Jaylen Brown who was doing everything for this offense. And now with the addition of Jayson Tatum, Derek White is getting back in a flow. He looks much better as of late. 21 points in this game, 8 of 16, 5 of 11 from 3. He looked fantastic. Peyton Pritchard's going to have his ups and downs, but he was great in this game, 19 points, 6 of 13. So just, an overall fantastic game. A game where, the Suns are an injured team, but they're still a playoff caliber team. I do think they're 7th at the moment in the West, and it's probably going to be hard for them to move in to the, playoffs, the top 6 spots, just because they're injured with Dillon Brooks being out. And there's just so many good teams in the Western Conference. The Lakers are playing really well right now. The Rockets, who knows what's going to happen with them. They are going up and down. The Timberwolves just are a really interesting team because it feels like they don't give or play with any effort in the regular season. They have just these big up and down swings, very similar to the Knicks, but on a just larger scale. But we all know that, they've gone to the Western Conference Finals, 2 years in a row now. They have been just a force in the playoffs, taking the Thunder to, or I guess the Nuggets to 7 games. They've battled well against the Lakers, actually 1-5 against the Lakers last year, right? So, and Anthony Edwards obviously is a top player in this league. In my opinion, a second team All-NBA. By the way, I know Luka, Cade, Wemby, Jokic, SGA, Donovan Mitchell, all these guys are sort of battling for 5 first-team All-NBA spots. If Jaylen Brown's not a first-team, and Kawhi you can put in there as well. If Jaylen Brown's not a first-team All-NBA player this season, that's just a disrespect to what he's done this season. And I know there's so many guys that you can put on there. I'm probably going to do a full video later, in the season where we'll go over awards and whatever, probably towards the end of the season when we do our season recap and whatever. But I have to have Jokic, SGA, Wemby, and just what the teams are doing this year. I'm going to go Jaylen Brown, and then I'm deciding between Jokic and Cade. And I do think, with the talent that the Lakers have in, Austin Reeves and LeBron and whatever, I think I'm going to put Cade Cunningham at 5th. That would be my 5 All-NBA first-team players. And, it's going to be hard. People are still have disrespect to what Jaylen Brown's doing this season. It's a shame. But, leave that for them Celtics haters in the world. But yeah, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for watching. We will be back actually tomorrow evening. It might come out Wednesday actually, but another podcast episode, as it has been 3 games since we did a little episode. We're going to talk about Jayson Tatum's continued progression. We're going to talk about whether the Celtics can catch the Detroit Pistons. It's going to be hard, but, they have a chance right now, especially because the Pistons have fallen off a little bit, especially with their shooting, and teams are, finding ways to beat them now that, Cade Cunningham's really the only driving factor for that team offensively. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about other things around the NBA and the Celtics as well. So tune in for that either Tuesday evening or Wednesday morning. Podcast number 58. You can check that out on YouTube, as well as Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts. And yeah, until next time, once again, the Celtics win 120-112 against the Phoenix Suns, improve to 45-23, 22 games over 500, or I guess, whatever, 10 games over 500, 22 games, 22 more wins than losses. So yeah, until next time, go Celtics.